You're tuned to Mountain States Policy Center.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are coming live on our social media channels on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter to let you know of some breaking news that's going on in the state of Idaho. The Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit has been upheld by the Idaho State Supreme Court. We are just getting the decision coming into us as we speak. Jason Mercier, who is our Vice President, Director of our research program, is going to be joining us here in a couple of minutes. But I think it's important to stress how big of a victory this is. The parental choice tax credit was something that the state of Idaho and the governor passed last legislative session, a $50 million program that has been wildly popular among parents, among people who wanted to make sure that their child had a great education, and it has been upheld. We are just getting the numbers or the actual decision into us right now. As I mentioned, Jason Mercier is going to be joining us here in just a moment to talk a little bit more about what exactly the court said. But this was in court several weeks ago in the Idaho State Supreme Court. We told you at the time that it was going to be an uphill battle for the petitioners in this case, because their case, quite frankly, was weak. We mentioned this all along, that their case was weak and that they would have a really difficult time making the justices agree with their point of view. In fact, they were peppered with questions throughout the hearing about the constitutionality of the program and whether, as one justice put it, whether the state could walk and chew gum at the same time. And it is clear, based on this ruling that is just coming out from the Idaho State Supreme Court, that the justices were not convinced by any of the arguments that the petitioners made in court. Again, if you're just joining us, the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit has been upheld by the Idaho State Supreme Court. We are just getting that decision coming to us just in the past few minutes. I think it's important to remember that on mountainstatespolicy.org, we actually laid out the different arguments that were going to be made in the case, and sure enough, those were the arguments that were made. Jason Mercier, as I mentioned, is the director of our research program, the vice president also at Mountain States Policy Center. Jason, I know we're just getting the ruling right now, but what can you tell us about what it says based on what you've read so far?
Yeah, doing my best, Chris, to speed read this 21-page opinion. But essentially, as you've indicated, the Idaho State Supreme Court has upheld House Bill 93, the Idaho Parental Tax Credit in its entirety. It is in full force and effect. And that is fantastic news for the thousands of families that have already signed up to try to get into the queue for application for this credit. In scanning this opinion, and we'll have a much more analysis as we have time to dig into all of these rulings, but it does look like the court granted relaxed standing, allowing the petitioners to have their arguments heard, but made very clear on the merits of what were being argued. And this is something that Mountain States Policy Center actually made in our amicus brief. The Idaho Constitution's requirement for the uniform application of the school system is a floor. It is not a ceiling. There is nothing prohibiting the legislature from adding on to that system of public education with additional education opportunities for citizens. And that is exactly what House 193 does. And that is now today what the Idaho State Supreme Court has approved. And it looks like I'm going to try to read here from the conclusion of the concurrence. And that was that today we have only determined that nothing in the Idaho Constitution prohibits the legislature, provided it fulfills its constitutional duty to public education, from using tax credits to assist parents who are financing their children's education. So, I mean, basically, again, as we were arguing, as long as the legislature is meeting its obligation to the public school system, they are free to provide additional resources to parents and citizens. That's what House 193 does, and that's what now is allowed underneath the state Supreme Court ruling.
Jason, there were a few parts of this that I want to also read live. And again, if you're just joining us, we just got a ruling from the Idaho State Supreme Court that has upheld, as we predicted they would, the parental choice tax credit, and has given families, I think, a huge sigh of relief. Jason, I want to read from page 14 of the ruling. It says, "We conclude that petitioner's reading of Article 9, Section 1 is inapt. Their reading is unduly restrictive and disregards the legislature's plenary power over all subjects of legislation not prohibited by the federal or state constitution." They all go on to say, "We hold that the use of the indefinite Article A in Article 9, which is the discussion that we had about what does A mean, does not impose a limitation on the legislature's authority to do more than what the provision minimally requires. Rather," and this is directly from our research, Jason, "it establishes a floor and not a ceiling. When a constitutional provision mandates the legislature do something that it has the authority to do, it is not reasonable to read that mandate as restricting the legislature's broader power to do something more." A complete victory, I think, Jason, for what we were pointing out at Mountain States Policy Center, what others were pointing out as well, that the legislature has the authority to do more programs on top of this.
Yeah, I think that was one of the frustrating things throughout the legislative session as this was being debated, and then hearing months later that this lawsuit was filed by the teachers union and other plaintiffs, is that Idaho was not the first to do this. Right? You have got over 28 states have already done some form of education choice, and when you consider, there are arguments, well, this is a voucher, this is an education savings account, this is a tax credit. And to that point, the legislature has plenary tax authority. And you have not seen across the country a single higher court toss a tax credit. So we knew that going into this session, the last session when this was being debated. And, we had this fantastic research where we went through every single court ruling across the country on education choice programs and pointed this out. And despite all of these facts being presented to the opponents of this and to those wanting to file a lawsuit, today's ruling is no surprise. It's what every court has done across the country, because again, as long as you're meeting your funding obligations, providing additional options to parents has never been unconstitutional, and a tax credit has never been struck down by any higher court.
Again, if you're just joining us, the Idaho State Supreme Court has upheld the parental choice tax credit. We were mentioning, Jason, on mountainstatespolicy.org that so many families have applied for this particular tax credit that, again, I hope, a sigh of relief. And I think it also is, it's also interesting, Jason, to note that I think the petitioners kind of saw the handwriting on the wall, if you will, going into that ruling, or excuse me, going into that court hearing, because when they walked out of it, I think they knew that things did not go well.
Well, again, for those who are veterans of watching legal arguments, you never can tell for sure what a court is going to do, because sometimes they'll play devil's advocate, sometimes they're trying to prod some of the arguments from their fellow justices. But it was very clear from start to finish that the Idaho Supreme Court justices were having a very hard time following the legal arguments being made to try to deny this education choice tax credit to Idaho families. And from the get-go, it was, adversarial is not the right word, but you repeatedly had justices kind of asking the plaintiffs, help me understand your argument because I'm not following it. And I think that's, again, what you saw borne out in this ruling today is, I think the only thing that was a little bit of a surprise to me going into this whole thing was the standing question.
Yeah.
Because nobody ever has standing to somebody else's tax credit. And you do, again, haven't had a chance to read every single word in this, but did scan the section on standing. And the court did relax their standing, but they were trying to do it in a way that didn't blow open the doors going forward on other legal issues. So that was one of the major concerns that you saw from several justices, is that if they took the plaintiff arguments to its logical conclusion, it wouldn't just strike down House Bill 93. It would strike down a host of other programs that the legislature has authorized that are outside of the traditional public school system. And they were very concerned about that. And I think that's why, again, you saw that floor, not ceiling wording now part of a legal decision in Idaho.
Jason, the other thing that I'm just getting into as we read the published opinion here, and this is a big deal. On the very last page, the Idaho Supreme Court has awarded attorney fees to the state. Now, you'll remember the petitioners, the teachers union, the Moscow School District, and others were basically asking for the exact opposite. They wanted attorney fees to be awarded to them. I don't remember seeing anything in the arguments. We saw just a brief snippet at the very end of the argument about this attorney fee issue. But now it has gone the reverse way, where the state has been awarded the attorney's fees. So now, and correct me if I'm wrong on this understanding, Jason, but now this means that the Idaho Education Association, the teachers union, the plaintiffs, the folks who brought the suit, will be responsible for the attorney's fees of the state.
Yeah, that's actually absolutely correct. And maybe this is something that we'll have to go back to the school district, the Moscow School District, that signed on to this, because we were told that there would be no cost to taxpayers for this. Hopefully that still is true. Now, this coalition that was led by the teachers union and other plaintiffs in there, as you indicated through the Supreme Court ruling, is now liable for the attorney fees and costs. I believe for sure for the tax commission, and then I think for the legislature and the state of Idaho, just the direct costs versus the attorney fees as well. But that's going to be something that now will have to be written out of that plaintiff coalition's pocketbook to pay for this litigation they brought against the state of Idaho.
Yeah, and they were very insistent, Jason, that this is not going to cost us anything, and this is all going to be paid for by someone else. Well, here you go. Now it is going to cost you something potentially here, and I don't think you could, as you said, Jason. Other than the standing issue, I'm not sure that that the plaintiffs were successful in any facet of the case.
No, it was just on standing. That was the only thing that was really in question. And you've actually seen several of these lawsuits across the country struck down on standing issues. So at least they barely cleared that first hurdle. But on all of the merits of the argument, the court rejected them and sided with the House Bill 93 text with the supporters. And as you indicated, really just ratified the legal arguments that we've been making and we provided to them in our amicus brief. And I think it's good going forward. We now know that the Idaho legislature is allowed to walk and chew gum at the same time. That's one of the comments that were made in the oral arguments from the justices. I think the most important thing is hopefully now finally we can put this to rest and start focusing on the real goal of this, to make sure this is a successful program, that those that take advantage of it are provided the opportunity to really improve opportunities that are tailored to their individual children. And we have to realize, again, this was not an attack on the public school system. This is not to try to have any harm in the public school system. For the vast majority of Idaho students and families that decide that is the best system to have the most outcomes for their student, that moves forward. This was just to help those that just needed that additional assistance. And now that we have this opinion out, and now that we're seeing the tremendous public response to this application process, we can focus our time and effort and energy where it should have been from the beginning, and making sure this is successful for students.
Absolutely. Jason, I want to read from another page of the brief. Or of the opinion, I should say. This is on page 20. And again, we'll put up the opinion on our social media channels. We'll get an analysis for you on our website here in just a couple of minutes on mountainstatespolicy.org. In Justice Mueller's concurrence in the opinion on page 20, he says, the petitioners have failed to prove that the state is not capable of simultaneously maintaining a constitutionally grounded system of public schools while also assisting parents who have elected not to participate in that system. Since the petitioners opted to bring their challenge to this court, through a direct action before a single tax credit had been approved and any harm they envision has come to pass, this court cannot prohibit through its extraordinary writ what has yet to be satisfactorily shown will violate a constitutional imperative. The petitioner's injury claims are currently hypothetical and speculative, yet they may be re-examined in the future if the impact of this legislation can be properly ascertained. So essentially, Jason, they're basically saying at the end there, Justice Mueller is in his concurrence, that you haven't proven that you have any injury on this.
Yeah, and there was a lot of discussion about this during the oral arguments when they were trying to determine the standing question is who's actually been harmed? What is the harm that this litigation is trying to address? Now, the argument was that by providing an optional additional resource for parents, you were harming the existing system. That was the argument they tried to make, and that's where the opinion says, no, this is a floor, not a ceiling. The state of Idaho can do both type of programs. Maybe you'll be able to find this, Chris. I remember in reading the opinion very quickly, there was some discussion about waiting just until this tax credit took effect to file the litigation instead of doing it when the legislature and the governor first signed the bill early last spring. A little dig in there about, if this was truly the emergency crisis that you made it to be, that's when you would have filed this, not on the eve of parents applying for the credit.
Yeah, really, and we pointed that out as well, Jason, in our brief, that look, the timing of this was very suspect in what the petitioners did. But again, I think this is just a huge win for families in our state, a huge win for the rule of law, for the Constitution, and for what the words mean, Jason. We always complain when judges look more into what the words mean than what they actually mean. And in this case, it all came down to the word A. It all came down to one single letter, and that is A. And we are absolutely thrilled to be able to report to you, for those of you who are just joining us, that the Idaho State Supreme Court, as we predicted, has upheld the state's new parental choice tax credit, and the 9,000 plus kids, Jason, who are participating in the program as of yesterday. The numbers that we got will continue to be able to try to participate, and I bet those numbers are going to improve and increase by the time March 15th rolls around.
Well, one more emphasis on a very good day it is for Idaho to see this go forward here. And now let's turn our time and effort and energy to making sure this is a successful program for parents.
Thanks very much, Jason Mercier, who is the director of our research program at Mountain States Policy Center. Go to mountainstatespolicy.org if you want to sign up to get on our email list. We'll also have an analysis up for you here in the next, give us about a half hour or so we can read through the whole court ruling, but we'll also get the court ruling up on our social media channels. In fact, we're doing that right now. Jason can hear me, and I'm sure he's putting it up on social media channels as we speak, so that you can get an idea of what the Idaho State Supreme Court has ruled, that the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit is constitutional. It will go forward. Go to mountainstatespolicy.org. Check out our social media channels as well if you want to learn more, but great news for families and great news for Idaho's Constitution. Thanks so much for joining us, and stay tuned to our social media channels and our website for more information.